Have you ever sat across from a woman you cared about, listening to all the right words, while something inside you kept saying something was wrong? Maybe she tells you she appreciates everything you do. She says you're different. She says she doesn't know what she'd do without you. And yet somehow you're always the one giving more time, more attention, more money, more emotional energy. You keep showing up, hoping that eventually the relationship will feel as mutual as it sounds. But deep down, another voice keeps asking, why does this feel so one-sided? Does she actually want me, or does she just want what I provide? Am I being loved, or am I being useful? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the sweetest words in a relationship can hide the biggest imbalance. And this isn't about assuming every woman who says these things is manipulating you. It's about learning to recognize when someone's words and behavior repeatedly tell two completely different stories. You're not stupid for believing someone you cared about. You're not weak because you wanted to see the best in her. You simply need to learn the difference between genuine connection and emotional convenience. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand 5 sweet lies that can sound like love when someone is benefiting from your presence more than they're valuing your person. And you'll know what to look for beneath the surface. Let's get into it. Most people believe being needed is proof that they're loved. But that's not always true. Someone can desperately need what you provide without genuinely valuing who you are. And that's where things become confusing. Because when someone needs your attention, your money, your emotional support, your connections, your stability, or your constant availability, they may make you feel incredibly important. You feel chosen. You feel special. You feel like you matter. But here's what nobody explains. Being useful and being loved are not the same emotional experience. Real connection has reciprocity. There is movement in both directions. You give and she gives. You listen and she listens. You show up and she finds ways to show up too. You don't have to keep earning your place. Because healthy love creates safety. Using creates dependency without necessarily creating intimacy, and your nervous system can actually feel the difference before your mind admits it. You might notice that you're constantly anxious about losing her. You're always trying harder. You're afraid to say no. You feel guilty when you have boundaries. You keep thinking, if I just do a little more, she'll finally appreciate me. That's the trap. Not more giving, not more proving, not becoming indispensable, but learning whether the relationship still exists when you stop performing a role for someone. That's the real test. And this is why the 5 lies we're about to discuss aren't necessarily obvious lies. Sometimes they're emotional statements that sound beautiful. The problem is what happens after she says them. Because words create a promise. Patterns reveal the truth. The first one sounds incredibly romantic. I don't know what I'd do without you. This one feels amazing. Most couples hear a sentence like this and immediately interpret it as, she deeply loves me. But here's the part no one talks about. Sometimes, I don't know what I'd do without you really means, I don't know what I'd do without everything you do for me. Those are very different things. If she loves your presence, she'll be interested in your inner world. She'll care about your dreams, your stress, your fears, your happiness. But if she's primarily attached to your usefulness, notice what happens when you stop providing. You don't answer immediately. You say no. You stop paying for everything. You stop fixing every problem. You become less available. And suddenly her warmth changes. That's when the truth starts becoming visible. Because most couples never examine what happens when the benefits disappear. Imagine she calls you late at night. She's upset. You listen for an hour. You comfort her. You help her solve the problem. She says, I seriously don't know what I'd do without you. You feel deeply valued. Now imagine the next week you're struggling. You call her. You say, honestly, I'm having a rough day. Can I talk to you? And she suddenly becomes unavailable. I'm tired. Can we talk tomorrow? I have a lot going on. Once? That means nothing. Repeatedly? Now you're looking at a pattern. And somewhere inside you, the thought becomes, she wants my support, but does she actually want to support me? That's the question. Because emotionally available love isn't just about who comforts whom. It's about whether both people matter. This isn't a communication hack. It's an identity shift. You stop measuring your value by how indispensable you can become. And you start asking whether the relationship feels reciprocal when you're simply being yourself. That's when being needed stops being your evidence of love. And being genuinely known becomes more important. The second one can pull you in even faster. You're the only man I can really trust. Because trust is intimate. When someone tells you that you're the only person they can rely on, it feels like you've been given a special place in their life. But this is where things become interesting. Sometimes being someone's emotional safety net can look almost identical to being their romantic partner. You become the person she calls when she's lonely, the person she calls when she's stressed, the person who listens to every crisis, the person who gives advice, the person who rescues her from consequences, and she keeps telling you how important you are. But when you ask for clarity about where the relationship is going, suddenly everything becomes complicated. I don't want labels. I'm just not ready. Why do we have to define everything? Meanwhile, you're functioning like a partner without receiving the security of one. Most people in relationships don't realize how exhausting that becomes. Because your nervous system starts living in uncertainty. You keep giving because you're hoping your loyalty will eventually turn into commitment. But here's what changes everything. You don't need to prove that you're trustworthy. A healthy relationship doesn't make you audition indefinitely for a position you've already been emotionally performing. Imagine she says, "You're the only person I can trust." The connecting response isn't to become her permanent rescuer. It's to notice whether she also becomes someone you can trust. When you're struggling, does she stay? When you have boundaries, does she respect them? When you say no, does she still treat you warmly? When you need reassurance, does she care? Because trust isn't something one person provides while the other consumes. It is something two people build. And if you're always carrying the emotional weight, you aren't building intimacy. You're carrying a relationship. There's a difference. And once you see it, you stop confusing emotional dependence with emotional connection. That's when your relationship starts feeling like partnership instead of responsibility. The third one sounds like an explanation. I'm just not good at showing my feelings. Here's the part most people never figure out. Sometimes someone genuinely struggles to express emotion. That alone doesn't make them manipulative. People have different attachment patterns, different histories, different ways of protecting themselves. But there's a difference between being emotionally guarded and using emotional unavailability to avoid reciprocity. Most couples miss this distinction. You might hear, "I'm just not good at showing my feelings." And because you care about her, you become patient. You give her space. You lower your expectations. You explain her behavior to yourself. You think, "She's been hurt before. She just needs time. I need to be understanding." And understanding is good. But understanding someone doesn't require abandoning yourself. Because if she can't express affection, can't communicate, can't reassure you, can't make time for you, and can't meet you emotionally, at some point, you have to stop asking whether her explanation is understandable and start asking whether the relationship is sustainable. Imagine you tell her, "I don't need perfection. I just need to feel like you actually want to be here." The disconnecting response is, "That's just how I am. If you can't accept it, that's your problem." The connecting response might sound more like, "I know I struggle with this, but I don't want you feeling alone. I'm going to work on it." Do you hear the difference? One protects the pattern. The other protects the relationship. Her brain may genuinely be saying, "I don't know how to open up." But if she cares, there will usually be some movement, not perfection movement. That matters. Because real love isn't proven by having no emotional limitations. It's proven by being willing to become more emotionally available when you realize your limitations are hurting someone you care about. That's repair. That's becoming. And that's what turns emotional distance into emotional safety. The fourth one is incredibly subtle. "I'm so busy, but you know how much you mean to me." Everyone gets busy. Everyone has responsibilities. Work gets intense. Life gets messy. So don't judge a relationship based on one busy week. Look at the pattern. Most couples make the mistake of listening to the explanation instead of watching the consistency. She says she cares, but you rarely see her. She says you're important, but you're always the one initiating. She says she misses you, but she never makes plans. She says you're special, but she gives you whatever time is left after everything else. And eventually, you start living on crumbs of attention while being told you're getting the whole meal. That's where the emotional confusion begins. You don't necessarily feel unloved. You feel uncertain. And uncertainty can be addictive. Because every once in a while, she gives you exactly what you've been waiting for. A beautiful message, a passionate night, a long conversation, a sudden burst of affection, and you think, "There she is. This is the woman I know she can be." But then she disappears emotionally again. This creates a cycle. Distance, longing, reconnection, hope, distance again. Your nervous system becomes attached to the relief. And here's what changes everything. Stop measuring love by intensity. Measure it by consistency. A relationship doesn't become secure because someone occasionally makes you feel incredible. It becomes secure because you repeatedly feel considered. Imagine saying, "I know you're busy. I don't need all your time. I just want to feel like we're both making room for this." A healthy response doesn't have to be perfect, but there should be curiosity. "I understand. Let's figure out what works for both of us." That's turning toward. That's presence. Someone who genuinely values the connection doesn't just tell you that you're important. They make room for you to experience that importance. And when words finally match patterns, your nervous system can stop waiting for the next disappearance. That's when love starts feeling peaceful instead of unpredictable. And the fifth one might be the sweetest of all. "I love you, but I need you to help me right now." This might be the sweetest one of all, because sometimes it comes wrapped in vulnerability. She needs help. She's overwhelmed. She's dealing with a problem. She says she loves you. And then she asks you to fix something. You help. Of course you do. You care about her. But here's the part no one talks about. If every expression of love eventually becomes a request, you need to pay attention. Most people in relationships don't notice the transition. At first, You're helping occasionally. Then you're always helping. Then helping becomes expected. Then saying no becomes a problem. And suddenly, you're not the person she loves. You're the person she relies on to make her life easier. Those roles can overlap, but they aren't identical. Imagine she says, "I love you so much. Can you handle this for me?" You help. Then 2 weeks later, another problem. Then another. Eventually you say, "I'm sorry, I can't take this on right now. I have too much going on." And instead of understanding, she becomes cold. "I thought you cared about me." That's a powerful sentence. Because now love has been turned into compliance. And that's where you need to slow down. Healthy love can survive a boundary. Manipulation often struggles with one. Not always, but often enough that the pattern matters. Her inner voice might be, "If he really loves me, he'll do this." Your inner voice becomes, "If I don't do this, she'll think I'm selfish." And now you're no longer acting from love. You're acting from fear. Fear of disappointing her, fear of losing her, fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough. But real intimacy requires two people who can say no without the relationship collapsing. That doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become honest. You can care without rescuing. You can love without overfunctioning. You can support someone without becoming responsible for their entire life. And this isn't about keeping score. It's about noticing whether care flows in both directions. Because the relationship you want isn't one where you're constantly proving that you're valuable. It's one where your value is already understood. So how do you know whether you're actually being used? Don't obsess over one sentence. Don't become suspicious of every affectionate thing a woman says. And don't turn yourself into a detective, looking for evidence that she's secretly manipulating you. Look at the pattern. That's where the truth lives. Ask yourself, what happens when I say no? What happens when I need support? What happens when I stop initiating? What happens when I stop paying for everything? What happens when I set a healthy boundary? What happens when I need emotional presence instead of providing it? And most importantly, would this relationship still feel connected if I stopped being useful for a while? That question can reveal a lot, because love isn't supposed to require you to constantly earn your position, not through money, not through attention, not through rescuing, not through endless availability, not through sacrificing your identity. And here's what nobody explains. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't realizing someone may be using you. It's realizing how much you participated in the pattern because being needed felt safer than being truly seen. You kept giving because giving made you feel valuable. You kept saying yes because saying no felt dangerous. You kept rescuing because rescuing gave you a role. But you don't need a role to deserve love. You need a relationship where both people can show up as whole human beings. Not perfect, not constantly available, not endlessly giving, just real. This isn't about becoming cynical. It's about becoming conscious. You don't need to stop trusting women. You need to stop ignoring patterns. You don't need to stop being generous. You need to stop using generosity to purchase emotional security. You don't need to become cold. You need boundaries strong enough to let you remain warm. That's maturity. And when you internalize this, you stop asking, "How can I make her value me?" And you start asking, "Does this relationship allow both of us to feel valued?" That's a completely different question, because the goal isn't to become harder to use. The goal is to become someone who no longer abandons himself just to keep someone else close. That's the real transformation. You stop chasing reassurance. You start creating clarity. You stop measuring love by how badly someone needs you. You start measuring it by how consistently you both turn toward each other. And suddenly, the relationship becomes easier to understand. Not because every question has an answer, but because you're finally willing to believe what the pattern has been telling you. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were constantly giving more, don't shame yourself for it. You were trying to love. You were trying to matter. You were trying to make something work. But becoming emotionally mature means learning that love isn't supposed to cost you your self-respect. You can be generous without being exploited. You can be understanding without accepting everything. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that the relationship isn't healthy for you. And you can walk away from a one-sided connection without becoming bitter about love itself. Because the right relationship won't require you to constantly prove that you're worth keeping. It will make room for your needs too. It will respect your boundaries. It will care about your inner world. And when you stop being useful for a moment, you'll still feel loved. That's the difference. Not more giving. Not more chasing. Not more proving. Just two people who genuinely value each other beneath everything they can provide. So remember this. Asterisk the right person won't just love what you do for them. They'll value who you are when you have nothing left to give.